It's that time of year again when the sun is shining, every second Beijinger is out with his camera, or smartphone more likely, snapping away at the blossoms, and the birds are all coughing on Beijing's fumes with the 2.5 p.m. level already in the upper 200s. For those not in the know, the US Embassy measures the dirty atmosphere and posts the results online, much to the government's chagrin. A reading of 50 or under is fine. 100 or below is deemed moderate. Up to 200 is unhealthy, and up to 300 is very unhealthy. And of course above that is hazardous. But nothing will keep your favourite podcaster indoors today, and it's off to discover yet another park in the city. Or, as it turns out, two parks. I'm actually heading off to discover Beijing's one and only Japanese-style park. And having studied the map and pored over copious websites, I head southwest where I discover that there's another small park I can make a short cut through to get to my destination. In fairness, it's not the most stunning park I've ever been in by a long way. Madian Park, however, is spotlessly clean, and you can tell its guardians have made an effort with it. There are plenty of kids' distractions in the way of swings and sandpits and slides and so on. The Prunus persica is still in full bloom here, and the contrasting colours around the park are very pleasing on the eye. In common with many parks in Beijing, there are notices everywhere advising where you can pitch a makeshift tent, find an emergency power source, for your mobile phone I wonder, or find an emergency toilet. Surely in Beijing it would have to be an emergency to make you desperate enough to get into one of them. Luckily, I'm not yet desperate enough to visit the said emergency convenience, and I wander out the other side of the park, taking a wrong turn, and finding myself in Deshengmenwai Dajie, heading south instead of west, as I had intended. But one of the advantages in getting lost is that one comes across the unexpected, and today is no exception. On the left-hand side is a lovely little garden whose gate has been left open, and I pop in to take a few snaps before hurrying out again unnoticed. The pillars of the gates to this garden each have a cute pichu perched on top. As I have veered off course from my original planned route, I find myself approaching the park I was actually looking for from its south side, a lucky move, as I'm to discover in a short while. Shuangshu Gongyuan, otherwise known as Double Elegant Park, was built jointly by China and Japan. It features two parks in one, Weifan Garden and Cuishe Garden, and its design is unlike that of traditional Chinese gardens. The park is quite small, covering an area of 64,000 square meters only, and it contains the only Japanese-style park in Beijing. In fact, when I mentioned this to a Chinese friend, she said she would never, ever set foot in it. Such is the animosity toward Japan still felt by many Chinese, 7 decades after the war of Japanese aggression and the continuing controversy surrounding the massacre of Nanjing. Shuangshu Park was built to commemorate the 35th anniversary of the founding of modern China. It was opened in 1984 with some of the rocks and building materials donated by Japan in a gesture of friendship. As I have approached the park from the south side, I find myself walking through the side of a housing estate through a couple of iron gates that the Chinese love to erect at the ends of streets and at the entrance to housing estates. And the next thing I know, I'm in the middle of Weifan Garden, which is the Chinese side, and which has plenty of meandering paths zigzagging their way past colourful trees. But it appears its main purpose has been designed to keep kids amused, with an overgrown amusement park featuring many rides, including an overhead monorail, and plenty of activity tables encouraging the kids to develop their artistic skills. It obviously works, as the kids are all as good as gold. In the middle of the park is what at first glance looks as if it's going to be a restaurant. It's called Jackson Hole, and it has an amusing entrance arch, but it looks totally deserted. Looking through the windows are old models of what looked like a housing development, and it's only later that I find that this was actually a real estate office dedicated to selling desirable lots in the themed resort area of Hebei, some 2 hours north of Beijing. Apparently, the houses sold like hotcakes. But I certainly didn't come to Beijing to revel in Americana, so I wander in search of the Japanese-style garden, passing a number of flowering trees and shrubs as I do. Tsuishi, or Emerald Green Garden, is the Japanese end, which, it's said, was designed by Japanese artists. But I have to say I've never seen a garden like this in Japan. Maybe it's been given a Chinese feel to it to make the locals feel more at home. It has a small waterfall, which today has been switched off, along with a whole water system, making for a somewhat lacklustre display that looks somewhat forlorn. The lack of water features apart, the blossoms are still gorgeous, and lift the spirit. There's another area called the Bamboo Rivulet. Perhaps the non-existent water is meant to flow here as well. But today it has an area of scruffiness that makes you wonder why they bothered. No worries, I climbed to the top of a small hillock and enjoy the varied colours of the shrubbery. Maybe they will switch the water on again once the blossoms have passed their best in a few days' time. Meanwhile, a little nearer the main entrance, I come across the peony garden. It's too early in the year right now, but it's obvious that this area will soon too be a riot for colour. But I'm not sure I will come all the way back to see it. I arrived at the main entrance on the southern side of the northwest third ring road that I would have come through had I not taken a wrong turning an hour ago. And it's only now that I realise how generous the fickle finger of fate has been in guiding me through the southern entrance. For here, as opposed to the other entrance I came through from the housing estate, one has to pay to get in. Yes, today I've saved myself the grand total of 0.2 kwai for an entry ticket. Okay, that 2 mao may only be worth 2 pence or 3 US cents, but you know what they say about looking after the pennies while the pounds look after themselves.